What a day. The 2018 Call of Duty World Champions have officially relocated. Team Envy announced Saturday that they've bought out all of EG's contracts and have decided to add those four alongside their own figurehead in Huke. Of course, to talk on this today, I'm joined by esports writer and esports awards, Journalist of the Year 2018 nominee, director of Dexerto, Mr. Mike Ken. How's it going today, Mike?
Good, thanks. Good. Just getting ready for the inevitable roster mania. And obviously this is just the beginning.
A lot of articles to write, I'm sure, over there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we obviously cover a lot of range of topics, but Call of Duty is always kind of our number one, still in the heart. So,
for sure.
Yeah, we're just kind of waiting for everything to kick off, and it sounds like stuff's about to get moving. So,
yeah, man, especially with this change, right? This kind of like sets off a crazy pace for what should be the future of well, I guess you could say ahead of the 5v5 era roster mania, but let's go and talk at this point, especially, right? Envy comes through and basically shocks everyone for the most part. They pick up the prior world champions. What does this say about Envy's year of World War II, huh? Picking up the world champions, kind of, essentially you could say starting over in some cases, yet they're kind of already having a roster that saw success, but keeping one player specifically. What does that say about Envy in World War II?
I mean, I don't think that there's any surprise that Envy decided to get rid of everyone but Huke. Huke's obviously someone that they know is a talented gamer. He's talented across multiple games, so they know he's going to pick it up. And obviously, he's been a hot property. He didn't perform amazingly last year, but I think that was just generally the Envy team never really took off. Never, especially that last team. I mean, great guys, Decimate, Chino, classic, but they're not really players where you're like, whoa, they're like the best players in the world. You know what I mean? They're like your stalwart players. Like, they're there to do the grind, and that's how you kind of describe those players, but they're not like Huke, who's like, can change the course of an entire game.
And multiple titles too, like you mentioned too. Like, of course, he comes from the Halo roster, comes into Call of Duty. It seems as if like they want him to be the brand guy to kind of like sell sponsorships too. He was on the taco commercial for a while for a reason, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
But what we talk about, right? Frustrating year. And at the beginning of World War II, it was also given to Slasher, right? Because this is a total rebrand. World champions coming for the next title, of Infinite Warfare. They even make it to Grands, yet they want to rebrand the roster. They started under Slasher. He ends up making a team. They don't see success. Slasher leaves the roster, and they start to kind of reform from the pieces of TK, grabbing Chino. Obviously, they get a few other players as well, in combination. But I think, like, to kind of go off what you mentioned too, this really shows how much confidence they have in Huke. Because, I mean, from the talks that I've heard from organization owners to people in the scene, it's like Envy, they want Huke. They don't want to release him. He's their guy, and if they were to lose him, it obviously goes to show they're willing to literally get rid of the entire team to keep him on the roster just to solidify him on the team. And you could argue that's the reason why they pick up EG in this case. But one thing to me, though, one of the most intense storylines, this will be a potential Dexerto post, I'm sure, along the article space, is going to be the E-Classico rivalry of Envy and EG is now going, or Envy and OG rather, is going to be more and more interesting, especially with Aches.
Well, yeah, exactly. With Aches on there, it makes it even more, maybe that's what Hastro was thinking. He was like, all these years I've kind of played second. I played second fiddle to Optic, and the only way I can stop them is by bringing in X. Maybe that's what he thought.
That's going to be one heck of a series. I cannot wait to watch them battle out through Black Ops 4. But now, speaking specifically on the contract buyouts, right? I know this wasn't a cheap purchase for the Envy organization to make, especially with all the rumored salaries kind of flying around the space as well. I believe there were actually talks within prior EG players with Echo Fox. I know Splice was a near definite for a while. That was the last thing that I had heard was that Splice was the target.
That's what I heard as well, and apparently it's the word on the street, should we say, is that it was down to one of the Envy players, or one of the EG players. I won't mention who, but he was offered a lot more in order to go to Envy, and then so he's the one that kind of was like convinced everyone else to ditch Splice and go for Envy. I think it's an interesting move. I mean, I think like the difference between going on Envy and going off Splice, I don't know how those organizations are run internally. But I imagine there was a lot of money offered. I imagine, being the world champions, that's the kind of thing where it doesn't even really matter how well they do next season. Obviously, you're going to hope they're going to do well. But like, even just picking them up initially to your sponsors, you're like, oh, I've got a world championship winning squad. All year, they're going to be the world champions, regardless of if they place in the top 6, they're still the world champions. So
yeah, I think a lot of people don't Right, exactly. I think a lot of people don't take that into consideration. They don't realize, like, to an organization, they're trying to sell this to their sponsors, saying, "Hey, like, we have this title. Like, we have a guy who you could even argue too, who guy in Halo, guy in Call of Duty. He's won multiple championships. He's looked upon as a top prospect throughout all of esports, especially console related. It's a thing that not many people kind of take into consideration. Those titles mean a lot, even though they might not be at their peak at that time. But what I guess you could say." What makes them a more desirable location from Envy into or compared to Splice? Do you think it's just solely money related?
I don't know. Maybe it's like history, prestige. Maybe it's the fact that Hastro's a former player and he's promised them this and that and the other. Or maybe it's because they want to play with Huke and they're like, you know what, Huke's better player than we want to play with Huke over Jerd. Perhaps think about it. Aix, he wants the best team possible. Huke, someone he can mold. Jerd is Jerd. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna get what you get with Jerd, but I feel like with Huke, maybe Aix feels that he can maybe mold them and turn them into part of this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But I gotta say too, right? With Huke now being considered the sole survivor for Team Envy in this case, right? Why do you feel as if they decided to pair Kyler up with the rest of the EG squad? Like, why do you think he's the best fit? Because I've been seeing a lot of people, at least on Reddit, kind of speculating and say, well, of course, Huke, being the player that he is. But I think one thing that we have to take into consideration as well is that the guy doesn't talk very much. And when we talk about 5v5, especially, the biggest argument has been made. Some guy needs to shut up. Some guy needs to be quiet and to be able to learn from the other team. I think this is really going to help quite a bit because Huke already coming from Halo, he's been playing with legends like Snipedown, like Pistola. He's already had that silence and he's going to bend that way and he already knows how to take direction. I think this is already like another positive, I guess you could say, for Huke over Jerd is the fact that he's not going to be saying a whole lot and he's just a consistent guy.
To be fair, I don't think Jerd says that much either.
That's true. That's true.
I don't think that's necessarily the issue.
That's a good point.
I think, with Huke, as I say, he's a young, world-class player. Jerd is a world-class player as well, don't get me wrong. But, perhaps they wanted an American on the side. Perhaps it was something said. I don't know. I mean, if you think about the way that the market is at the moment, like the player is king at the moment. The organizations are desperate for the top players. So, like you mentioned before about people like Chino and Decimate and people like that, classic, they'll get picked up no problem because they're experienced top class players who have, well, at least most of them do, have a background in playing at a top level. The organizations are clamoring for people like that. And now it's 5v5, there's less players than ever. So it doesn't, I think that this only strengthens the player's position as much as they all hate it.
Oh, for sure. And of course, moving forward though, when it comes to roles for Black Ops 4, getting back on the Envy side especially, right? Everyone's under the assumption, at least according to Twitter, according to especially pros that I've had on here as well, they're under the assumption the roles for Black Ops 4 are going to be 2 ARs, 2 SMGs, and 1 Flex. I think in this situation, depending on, of course, looking at Envy specifically, right? Assault pretty much locked in to be your assault rifle player. Second AR, you could argue between Aix and Silly to be second AR compared to Flex. I know back in, like Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare, I'm pretty sure Silly ran the AR. But to me, the most exciting thing about this entire team, and all really when anyone has been talking about, has been the sub-duo of Apathy and Huke. To me, that dynamic, along with seeing Aix and Huke on the same team, that sounds incredible, Mike.
I mean, it does. But, I mean, you've got to see how the game plays out. It could be that it's an actual nightmare and that you need just
Look
you
at
just
you, Mike,
just
being Mr. Optimistic here.
No, look, it could be, like, no doubt, they're both amazing players. But what happens when one starts out shining the other? Does the other get, if only one SMG on a map can actually do really well, then what happens then? And one of the SMG players has to do badly. Are you going to have someone like Huke or Apathy just willing to be that kind of almost bait?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I think one thing that many people aren't taking into consideration is how different like 5v5 is going to play. Like it's another voice. It's kills that are being taken throughout the map. It's time in the hard point, like their communication as well. There's so many little facets, of course, not even taking into consideration organization's point of view, but 5v5, it's a much different beast. But one thing that's going to make the transition a little bit easier is there was confirmation as well that Bevel's actually the previous coach of EG is also making the trip over to Envy as well, which I think is going to be great for their strategies and whatnot. But of course, with the dust settled now, it seems that Chino, Classic, and Decimate are all now restricted free agents, still under the Envy banner, but are available to go to different orgs as well. I mean, at this point, outside of a few teams, I guess everyone's kind of looking for a fifth still, Mike. I guess like
everyone's looking for a fifth, and at the same time, if you take those three players don't you then get an automatic spot in pools as well?
Yeah, you do. 3 players.
So what? So you could actually, if you're an org and you've got 2 players, you could actually pick up those 3, and then automatically you're going to be in pools at champs, not champs, at Vegas. So you've got to think that that they've got that as a strength of those 3. They might go their separate ways, but as you said, everyone's looking for a 5th as well. There's a real, in terms of like experience, you're going to see some, as much as people say it isn't going to happen, you're going to see some players join teams who you wouldn't really expect, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor. I was looking through a few of the rosters, a few of the organizations, and thinking like, how could maybe Chino fit? How could Classic fit? How could Decimate maybe fit into the interval? I mean, I was looking at a few, like FaZe, I know is looking for a solid 5th. I don't think that any of them necessarily make sense outside of like maybe Chino because of the AR position.
Well, what was the new COD burner saying? He was saying that accuracy or
methods probably.
Methods.
Yeah. That to me makes the most sense. And that's what I've heard makes the most sense according to them as well. So
yeah,
I don't think necessarily anyone really fits there specifically outside of those 2. Of course, maybe if you run into a problem, but I guess you could say for EG, they're looking for an entirely new roster, so that would be their ticket into pools, like we mentioned earlier. Echo Fox, I know that's still pretty much up in the air. I was kind of looking at,
and unlike people like Renegades looking for a team as well.
That's true. Renegades. There's a lot of organizations. What was that?
Chino used to play for Renegades as well. So
he did. Yeah, Black Ops 3.
That could be a route that they could go down because he's obviously tried and tested, so to say.
I think like Reciprocity is also an organization out there that people are kind of hinting toward probably going to enter.
Yeah, I don't know because Swiss wasn't really like. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they have.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about them in terms of like what level of sort of money they have.
they're able to. They're going to need quite a bit. It's fair to say too.
Because you need exactly 5 players each earning probably say up to 10 grand a piece.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot.
It is. It's pretty crazy to say the least. But
10 grand a month as well.
Yeah. And then also you got like Splice out there along with Jared, and then like I said, man, I've been hearing a lot of word about G2. Like G2 seems as if they could maybe be entering the space.
As well, yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's fair to say like roster mania is going to kick off crazy. And the fact that we have all these organizations on a list on paper saying the rosters aren't filled, a lot of organizations are still out there wanting to get into the space, and then we could see a few sleepers, maybe guys who we aren't expecting as far as organizations to make their pave here into Black Ops 4.
I think we'll see I think in the top 4 at Vegas, we'll have at least one surprise team / organization.
You think so?
That's my prediction. Because obviously the top 4 get into the Pro League automatically. I think we'll see a big surprise because it'll be the start of the year, first event. Someone will have worked out a meta that no one else has, not shared it, and then there's been loads of times where that's happened. That's the problem with doing the Pro League qualification, at least part of it by one event, but. I think you'll see a surprise team in the top 4.
That'd be interesting.
That's my prediction.
Is that Mike's prediction?
Yeah, sealed.
I gotta ask you too. Based off the rumored teams right now, for especially OG and 100T, if there was one of them to make it into the top 4, who is it right now in your mind? That's a hard one, I know. I threw that curveball at you.
I mean, I don't really know that. I don't know too much about the 100Ds lineup, but I think just in terms of the experience that Optic have, probably Optic.
Okay. I like it, man.
A lot of people will be like, oh, well, you're just an Optic fan.
All right, Mike. Well, of course, the Dexerto articles are always favored toward OG anyway. That's I'm sure the right.
Well, that's the word on the street. Even when it's negative, it's biased.
Well, of course, guys, you can follow Mike on Twitter @DexertoMike or visit Dexerto.com for the latest in esports news. Always a pleasure, buddy.